John Fabbricatore's in studio with us, and I'm looking at his website. These MMA battle pictures.
Oh, good. I thought you were going to say
something. This guy is a beast.
I've
come up with another solution, a whole new solution for our border problems.
What?
Put him down there.
And that's what it should be. It should be we go back to the Thunderdome with Mad Max. And so John stands there, and then you've got Tina Turner outside. Well, she's not there more, but stand outside and go, 2 men enter, 1 man leave. Who wants to be an American? And then you see what we can do. I like this. So we can make money on this.
John Fabbricatore is running for Congressional District 6. He's a retired member of the Senior Executive Service and former field office director for U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement. Enforcement and removal operations. Oh my gosh, this guy's bio is huge. The jurisdiction John oversaw included Colorado and Wyoming, covering 200,000 square miles and more than 200 federal employees. John began his career of service by joining the United States Air Force. During his 4 years of service in the Air Force, John served as security police and security forces member. And then he's just built. This guy's legit, man. Let's put him down at the border. John, thanks so much for being in studio on the Jeff and Bill show.
I'm not taking pictures afterwards. I look so bad. I can't do that. That's
thanks a lot for having me, guys. I really appreciate you, bringing me on and let me talk. So it's great. Yeah,
it's great.
So let's start at the beginning.
Sure. Where
were you born? Who are you? What did you do? We read a little bit of your bio, and then let's get to why in the world are you running against Jason Crow?
Yeah, so I was born in New York. I'm a New York kid. Was born in Queens. Grew up on Long Island, and then joined the Air Force in 1991. Traveled around the world. Was stationed at Spangdahlem in Germany. Went to Saudi Arabia. Wound up up at F.E. Warren up in Wyoming. Had my first child up there. So my son was actually born in Fort Collins in 1995. Became a federal agent in 1996, worked 2 years in downtown Manhattan, and then transferred out here to Colorado to work on the Oklahoma City bombing trial.
Wow.
Never left Colorado after that.
What'd you do for that?
So I was with Federal Protective Service at the time. Wow. So my first agency that I was with was FPS, and we provided protection for the judges. So I actually was I provided protection for Michael Tiger, who was the attorney at that time for Nichols. So I provided protection for that. So right after that trial, I applied for INS, which Immigration Naturalization Service at the time. Got on with INS in like 1998, 99, and my career started after that. Wound up in ICE and onward.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for your service. Thank you for what you've done for this country. Why in the world would you put yourself in a position of wanting to run for office?
Yeah, look, I retired because of this administration. So, really? I was just tired of taking orders that I knew were not keeping America safe. Wow. So, they had brought me up to DC to work on the Afghanistan withdrawal. I went up there. It was a huge debacle. I didn't like what was going on. I came back to the office. I'm like, I just can't work for this administration anymore. I can't tell my officers to go down to the border and just wave people in and then come back here and we've got this problem. We're letting in people that are causing problems in the United States. So I had 30 years in. I called it a day. I went home and I got pissed off at myself. I'm like, I've been fighting for America since I'm 18 years old. Yeah. I just can't be retired, kick my feet up, go hunting and fishing, and say I'm done.
Wow.
And I jumped on with Steve Monahan to help him, in his battle when he was running for Congress. And it just kind of put back into me that, John, your fight's not over. You got to get back in the fight, go back out there, do this. So, unfortunately, Steve didn't win against Crow. And I made the decision this year that I was going to jump in the fight and continue working for America.
I appreciate you being willing to jump in. It's not an easy district, right? No. So this is one that he's won by, double-digit percentages the last 2 terms. So what do you do differently that the other Republicans weren't able to do?
Yeah, I got in very early. So, I said I was going to run in October. So jumped in the race in October, started raising money, started getting myself out there, doing a lot of public speaking. A lot of people asked me to come and speak about the border, about immigration. I've testified in front of Congress this last July. So just getting my name out there overall is a big thing. I think I have a broader internet people can go and Google me and they'll find a lot of stuff about me. The other candidates didn't really have a lot about that. So for me, it's about really getting out there and hitting the unaffiliated, the unregistered voters, getting out there, being able to speak to Democrats. Most Republicans that speak to me, they like what I talk about, but it's really being able to get out in front of everybody else and really explain to them what I'm for, what I'm about, and what I'm going to do for America when I get to Congress. And I think that's the way that we attack this. We just don't look at talking to the Republicans out there. Hopefully they're going to vote for me. It's really about me getting out there and getting to that 38% of the unaffiliated, unregistered voters.
So where are they? What do you do? How do you connect with them?
You just gotta be comfortable about being uncomfortable, about going into places that normally we don't go to. Like I'll attend an event on Colfax that's a Democrat event. I went to one a couple of weeks ago. Last night I went to a bipartisan event downtown. It's about getting out there and putting yourself in a position where people aren't going to like you when you tell them that you have an R next to your name, but getting into a conversation with them. I mean, I think we've lost the ability to just get out there and talk to people. We think, oh, he's an R, he's a D, I don't agree with him. No, let's have a conversation, and maybe you'll realize that you do agree with me on certain points. I might agree with you on a couple of different points. Let's get to that middle ground and actually have a debate without saying, I hate you because of this, or, I dislike this, because you feel this way. No, let's have a real conversation like real people used to have. And maybe you'll find that I'm the guy that you would vote for. Talking with John
Fabbricatore.
Just call me Fab.
I'm going to get it. Fabbricatore. He's running for CD6. John, besides just putting you on the border to stop illegal immigration, what's the actual plan?
Here's the big thing with me. I hate when people say that immigration law is broken, because it's not broken. It's just not, we're not using the law. The way that the law is written, we're just ignoring what's actually on the books. If we went in and actually look at the Immigration Nationality Act, there's plenty of law there that could protect us and keep our borders secure. But this president especially has just decided that he's not going to look at the Immigration Nationality Act, and he's just going to let people come into this country. So number one, we have to look at the law and say that we're going to enforce the law. So enforcement is number one automatically. The laws that are on the books, we are going to enforce them. The second thing that we have to do is make sure that we are not magnetizing illegal immigration. I really do believe that the way that these sanctuary cities are formed and what they're doing actually magnetizes illegal aliens to be coming into the country and wanting to wind up in those districts because they're going to get money. They're not going to get deported because the police aren't going to report their status to ICE. So it magnetizes illegal immigration. We need to have deterrence in that people come here and then they don't get all these benefits and they get reported to ICE. They won't want to be here if it's harder for them to be here. So many sanctuary cities have made it easy for them to be here that they just keep coming in. I mean, they really believe that once they cross the border, it's free for them. They're not going to get deported. And, we have to really look at that, and we have to put deterrence in place.
How concerned are you about a mass casualty attack taking place?
It's something that keeps me awake at night every single night. I mean, I know what's coming over the border, that there are very, very bad people coming over the border. Absolutely. So I was in charge of intel for many years in the Denver field office. I know what has gone on, what has come in. I mean, just recently we had a Al-Shabaab terrorist from I believe he was from Somalia, came over. He was in the United States for 1 year. We let him cross the border, allowed him to come in before that intel information hit the wire and said, hey, this guy entered a year ago. This guy wandered the United States for a year before ICE finally caught up with him in Minnesota for 1 year. And he was a bomb maker for Al-Shabaab. So, we have this happening a lot. We've had a lot of terrorists, suspected terrorists, cross the border, especially last fiscal year. The number's larger than it's ever been. We know that people are getting into this country that want to cause harm to America. 1.7 million gotaways. Why were they gotaways? Most people are turning themselves in to Border Patrol so they can get paperwork to appear in front of an immigration judge and claim asylum. When you're a gotaway for a reason. You're a gotaway either because you have a criminal history background or you're on some kind of intel list.
John Fabbricatore, he's running for Congressional District 6. John, would you support mass roundups?
So no, look at the law. I don't support mass roundups because you have to determine whether the person can legally be here or not. Immigration law is very convoluted. It's even me, who I consider myself an expert, a subject matter expert on it. I refer to the law all the time. I'm constantly looking at the law book because there's different categories that people fit into. So the biggest thing is we need to identify what their statuses are. And then once their status is identified, then making that determination whether they should be deported. And there are millions that would fit within to that status right away. Number one, we're not even talking about the amount of overstays that come here legally on visas and never leave. They come here for either on a business visa, or they come here on a holiday visa, and they're here visiting and they never go home. Or they come here to go to college, never go to college, violate their visa, never go home. It's almost 800,000 a year that is happening. So we're just increasing that. So right away we can go after those. There's on the docket right now for immigration 1.2 million people that have final orders of deportation. That means they've seen an immigration judge. The immigration judge says, no, you don't have a legal reason to be here. I order you deported. They've never left. And ICE has never gone out and gotten them. So we can deport those right away. That's a bucket of 2 million people that we could round up and then send out because legally we could do it right away.
Now, John Fabbricatore joining Jeff and Bill Show, a candidate for CD6. Want to let you know we have some breaking news right now. There's been an earthquake, a 4.8, that resonated from New Jersey through New York, being felt in both Connecticut and Pennsylvania, reporting right now. So far, they're saying somewhat minor. We will get you any information about anything, any negatives that happened as we go forward. Now, John, what I want to ask you is, in Colorado, it's obviously a more liberal approach to how we deal with both immigration and the issue with illegal drugs. You have boots on the ground experience with both of those. In your opinion, what are we getting wrong, both as a state and also as a nation, about illegal immigration and about the illegal drugs that are coming across the border? I give you the magic wand. How do we fix it?
Yeah, number one, I mean, we have to look at it and look at sanctuary cities as protecting criminal illegal aliens, because that's what sanctuary cities actually do. Sanctuary cities don't protect American citizens. It protects illegal aliens. So, the police are not working closely with ICE, especially in the intel arena. Like ICE is aware of who some of these drug traffickers are, who's coming across the border that we have eyes on. And if we're not making those connections with local law enforcement, we're missing a big piece of the puzzle. And we're not able to identify those people that definitely should be removed and gotten out of the communities. So when you say that I've had boots on the ground, I've definitely done that. Back 15 years ago, we would work hand in hand with Denver PD and the DEA, and we'd be downtown arresting heroin dealers, rounding them up, deporting them, and getting them out of the community right away. And that was very successful. It allowed us to go in and get rid of traffickers right away. We weren't filling up the local jails because ICE would put our hands on them and we deport them and they'd be gone out of the community. We've lost that ability. We've lost that ability to be comfortable with local law enforcement and work with them. And a big hole has developed. We're getting a lot wrong with trafficking because we're not identifying the sources like we should. We know the cartels are operating in Colorado. We know they like Colorado because of sanctuary status. And people say, even the governor, this isn't a sanctuary state. Just look at all the laws that have been passed by the state legislature since 2013. I mean, there's been, half dozen or so laws making this a sanctuary state. We are 100% a sanctuary state, no matter what anybody says. And because of that, drugs are allowed to flow into Colorado more freely. And again, ICE isn't working with local law enforcement, and we're not getting to the root causes in order to be able to stop it.
I think it's going to be the top issue in this election. And I think Democrats recognize that too. It's why Joe Biden was forced to go to the border. Yeah. It looked like watching a middle school kid forced to do like a recital. Joe Biden didn't want to be down there, but he had to show. I mean, he put Kamala Harris in charge of the border. Like, you probably couldn't find a dumber person in the world to put in charge of the border. And she didn't do anything because she doesn't care and everything's turned out. But you going to support Trump for president?
Yeah. Look, I worked for, I've worked for multiple presidents, right? So I came on under President Clinton, worked through President Bush, President Obama, President Trump, and then Biden. I enjoyed my time under President Trump because he actually let us enforce the law. And I know the Democrats didn't like that. Anytime, he enforced the law, they're like, where did that law come from? Well, it was on the books. It's been on the books for 30 years. No one was enforcing it. Trump decided to enforce it. And they sued him, hundreds and hundreds of times to make sure he couldn't enforce those laws. But President Trump's got a plan. He is the candidate for the Republican Party. I will 100% support what he wants to do. So yes, I will support President Trump.
So Jason Crow he's kind of a golden boy for the Democrats, right? Yeah. He's got the military history, and he votes their way 100% of the time. Yeah. I think that's what drives me crazy is like CD6 was Mike Kaufman's district, right?
Yeah.
And prior to that, it was Tom Tancredo's district. Yes. And you get a guy in who has a 0% rating by the Heritage Foundation. He's not a moderate. He's not even close to a moderate. He's as lib as you can get leftist out there is Jason Crow. But, he kind of puts himself out there as a more moderate candidate. So what's the strategy? How do you beat him?
You've said it. Attack him on his record. We know what his record is, but the problem is most people don't look up the candidate's record.
They don't.
They see Jason. He's got a nice smile on. He's not an imposing guy. He kind of fits into situations, looks all friendly, But he is a polished leftist Democrat, not just a Democrat. He is a leftist Democrat, far to the left. So, for me, it's really about getting into conversations with people and saying, do you know that Jason voted against this? Do you know that Jason voted for this? And allowing them to see exactly what he's voting for, what he's voting against, and what he's voting for. And that's where it's important for me to be able to get out and have conversations with people, or at least message out in my mail outs and my social media, allowing them to see what Jason actually votes for or does not vote for. Jason's very anti-2A. I mean, if you support the Constitution and you're a gun owner and you're shall not be infringed is what you believe, Jason does not believe that. And, people don't realize that. I mean, his stance on illegal immigration, he's wanted to close down the Aurora detention facility since he became a congressman. He does not believe that any of these illegal aliens should be in jail. And the ones that I kept in jail, 85% of them had criminal convictions when I was the field office director. So that means I had gang members in there. I had people that had committed murders. And he wanted to close that down and release them back on the street until they were deported. I'm not for that. I believe that these people, once they've been convicted and they're in my custody until they're deported, they should be held in custody, because releasing them back into the community is dangerous for American citizens and legal residents.
As you're out there talking to people, and we're talking to John Fabbricatore, candidate for CD6, moderate district, what are you hearing from the people? What's the most important issue for them for you to address?
Yeah, illegal immigration and crime are definitely something that a lot of people talk to me about because of my background, but it's also the economy. So, I'm very in tune with the younger population. My son's 29 years old. I went to Turning Point in February to talk to a lot of younger people because I knew a lot of younger Republicans were going to be there, the under 30 crowd. And what they want for our country is a little bit different than what I want as a 51-year-old guy. I've got my house. I've had my career. They're worried about the economy. They're worried about how they're going to pay bills. They're worried what they're going to do for the next 20 years. They're worried about if there's going to be an America in the next 20 years. So they have some different concerns than I do. And it's about being able to listen without speaking to them. I mean, just open up your ears, listen to what our younger conservatives are really talking about, and kind of move in that direction, because they're going to be in charge of this party someday. So again, it's just about really getting out to the people, making this a grassroots campaign, getting out and talking to the people that really matter and should be voting. There's a segment that's going to vote for me because they go to the voting booth every election day. I've got to hit the people that don't vote, that they're registered to vote, or maybe they're not registered and we get them registered to vote, but get them into the voting booth, affect them, talk to them, see what their concerns are, and then get them to vote in November.
One of the votes you're going to have to make if you get into Congress is going to be around funding issues, funding for the war in Israel against Hamas, funding for the war in Ukraine, Putin, Russia.
Yeah.
Where do you fall along the lines on those?
Man, I'm a very strict fiscal conservative. So I personally believe we send too much money out of the United States and don't focus on spending enough money in the United States. I think that's what most taxpayers want. They want our money, that the taxes we're putting in, they want to know that it's getting spent for our children and for us. I think we spend way too much in Ukraine. I don't agree with the numbers that we're sending over there, the amount of money. It's the same thing for Israel. I mean, I support Israel 100%. I support the intelligence we're giving to Israel. I support the military outreach that we're giving to Israel. But we really do need to look at the amount of money that we send outside of the United States. I mean, just in this last funding bill, there was $380 billion that they were sending to secure the borders in Lebanon and Oman and Jordan. And we only increased our Border Patrol budget by $2 million to $20 billion. I mean, by $2 billion to $20 billion this year. So we're spending $380 billion somewhere and only spending $20 billion in our own Border Patrol. So it's numbers like that when I see stuff like that, and I see how much money goes outward to support everybody else, and we're not doing a good enough job supporting the United States.
Ooh, that's interesting. I want to follow up on that. John Fabbricatore, candidate for CD6, going against Jason Crow, joining the Jeff and Bill show. I like the idea of talking about where the budget and the priorities are, and the idea of walking and chewing gum at the same time. Recently, there has been border packages that have been passed by both Republicans, one stalled in the Senate. Then there's been a bipartisan that went from the Senate into the House. I'm of the opinion that our government needs to function based on compromise. If you look at those two packages, which one do you prefer? And let's assume that a compromise type of a bill comes forward, much like the one that is languishing in the House right now. What's your opinion on that? How much, if anything, are you willing to give to the Democrats?
So I love this question. So HR 2 is what I actually support. So the House bill that came out, and then the Democrats just kind of ignored it. So that came out in May. The Democrats ignored it. Most people don't even know that HR 2, Secure the Border Act, is even a thing, because everybody talks about the bipartisan Senate bill. But I'm not a fan of the bipartisan Senate bill, because I don't believe we should vote for trash. And I believe it's a trash bill. So I believe it doesn't give enough to interior enforcement. I believe it gives too much money to NGOs. It gives too much money to processing. It doesn't increase the detention number inside the United States, where HR 2 does that. So for me, if you're talking about compromise, yes, there needs to be some compromise, but the compromise for me needs to be that everything needs to go into enforcement, and we need to give less to the NGOs and the processing and the things that are making America less safe. I would compromise on more of the enforcement side and less on giving more and more money to NGOs that are just getting rich off of that money and not really doing much to, secure America.
Interesting.
Talking with Friday in the Mile High City, opening day for the Rockies downtown. I hope you get downtown and enjoy this nice weather. 75 degrees, just windy.
Gorgeous.
So it'll be fun to watch those baseballs flying around.
Isn't it nice that our guest in studio, John Fabbricatore, who's running for CD6, decided to go full Britney Spears, crazy Spears, and shave his head? That's what I'm assuming, because of the music. I'm assuming that's the reason he did it. Just, yeah. Not because he's losing the hair. He's a Britney fan. That's the story I'm going to tell everybody.
John is a retired member of the Senior Executive Service and former field office director for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the Enforcement Removal Operations. This is a serious dude. If you look at the pictures, if you go to his website, johnfabbricatoreforcongress.com, he was an MMA fighter. Dude, so the Lord did not give me any type of body to be able to handle that. Wait, do you remember Mike Tyson's Punch Out?
Oh, yeah.
Glass jaw Joe?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Glass jaw Jeff. One punch, and the jaw would literally probably separate. And I'd spend the next 6 years of my life recovering from that. So you were an MMA fighter. Tell us what that was like, man.
Yeah. So, I had 8 fights in MMA, mostly local fights. I did fight one time in Atlanta. I was the 2002 Denver light heavyweight tough man champion back when Tough Man used to be on FX TV. So I won that tough man championship back in 2002 here in Denver. Look, I really got into fighting as a way to control fear and adrenaline. So, for me, for anyone who's ever been into, this kind of thing, I've been wrestling since I'm 8 years old. Like, I've always been in kind of like combative sports. But, there's this thing in law enforcement, in the military, when you're in high threat, high risk situations, you get that adrenaline dump, you have that fear response. And there's nothing in the world that you can really train on a regular basis to kind of fight those things, those natural things that happen to your body, except for combative sports. So I really started getting into the boxing and the MMA really as a way to find a way to control those body responses in me, to control that fear response, control that adrenaline response, be able to control how I breathe and how I enter a very stressful situation. And the best way to do that is to get locked in a cage with another human being and have the bell sound and know that you're about to get into a fist fight.
And what was your record? 8 fights?
I had 8 fights. I was 3-1-1. So I had 3 wins, 3 losses, 1 no contest because I kicked a guy when he had fallen to both knees, and then draw.
So tell me
Did you mean to kick him? Wait, did you mean to kick him?
Yeah, well, I didn't mean to kick him like that. I had hit him with a liver shot. Yeah. It was a delayed reaction, and I was throwing a kick to his side, and when the liver shot hit him and he fell, he dropped, and I kicked him in the face, and I shouldn't have. And
shouldn't have is maybe.
So what's the difference? What's the difference in winning and losing? Like the feeling. I mean, I've been a campaign strategist, and I've lost campaigns, and like getting up off the mat, figuratively. The morning after you've lost a campaign is tough. But the high of having a client win is super amazing as well. So tell me what you go through emotionally with
emotionally, and you'll see this with a lot of fighters in the UFC and a lot of the big organizations. You'll see some people come to tears after, just the emotional response, because you put so much into training and getting ready for that situation. And then you do something stupid and you lose right away. And that just replays in your head. I mean, some of the fights I've lost, I've gone home and I've just replayed it over and over and over in my head. Like, I should have done this. I should have done this. But you didn't, John. You didn't. The game plan didn't come together. You went in there, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. You got submitted. It happened. So in a way, combat sports like this, it really allows you to kind of internally look at yourself, kind of compartmentalize things. And it just has really helped me with my life. Like, I still do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I teach our female class on Saturdays. I'm an assistant coach at 6 o'clock in the morning. I go and I teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as an assistant coach. So, it's, for me, it's a big part of my life. It's a stress relief, but it still allows me to feel those stressors and deal with it. And I think that's going to help me even in this campaign. Like it's very easy for me to walk into a room full of people that I don't know. And I don't get nervous about things like that, just because I have this innate comfortability with myself. And I really believe that's from being in a law enforcement environment, from being in the military, and practicing combat sports.
John Fabbricatore is running for Congressional District 6. Jason Crow, a Ranger.
Yep.
We put you guys together. Who wins?
I win automatically. Look, I have a lot of respect for Jason, and that being a Ranger is not easy. I will never hit on that guy on that. Like, you go through Ranger school, you made it through. It's huge. But Jason's been using that Ranger thing since he started, right? So now we need to start looking at his record, but if Jason and I were in a ring, even Jason knows I'm going to come out winning on that one. But,
there's the clip that. Fighting words, Jason.
I mean, if Jason wanted to do, a fundraising boxing match, I'd be totally into that. But
I love it. Let's go to Gary in Denver. Gary, you're on the Jeff and Bill show. News Talk 710 KNUS, in studio with us, John Fabbricatore.
Oh, hi. I had a couple questions for John. John, we all know that in every election there's a minimal amount of fraud. But do you think that the 2020 presidential elections there was so much fraud that it swayed the election to Biden?
As a former law enforcement officer and an investigator, I believe in evidence, and I don't believe that there's been enough evidence to show that. Was there fraud? I'm seeing it. There's definitely been some stuff that had happened, but to really show that it swung all the way in one direction, it's very hard for me to say definitely, because I have not seen that amount of evidence to show me that it has. Now, with that being said, I totally believe we need to secure our elections better and do a better job at making everyone feel comfortable that our elections are being held fairly. And I think we've had problems with elections as far back as I can remember since I've been voting, hanging chads and everything else that we can look at, that we really need to start looking at our election process and making sure that we have fair and free elections and that people are comfortable with what happens at the end of that election cycle. Having IDs. I believe people should show an ID when they go and vote. I don't know why we don't do that, and it's something that I'm very much in favor of. But I can't say that the election was stolen because I haven't seen that amount of evidence to show that.
All right, I can respect that, and I agree with that. And then my last question is, Donald Trump has been using a lot of fear mongering and implying that a lot of the fentanyl is coming over the border by individuals that are coming through the border. And we all know that 80 or 90% comes through the ports of entry. So what's your opinion on that topic?
Well, I'm going to have to school you a little bit on that, because you're slightly wrong there. So when we look at what's coming through, yes, 80% of the fentanyl is being stopped at the ports of entry. That is the stat. Why is it being stopped at the port of entry? Because we have the most police officers, dogs, and technology to stop it at the port of entry. So the stat is people say it wrong all the time. And it's not just you, sir. It's been put out by the media and people keep repeating it. When we say that 80% comes through the ports, that's because that's what we catch coming through the ports of entry. We have no idea how much fentanyl comes around the ports of entry because we're not catching it. Though that 1.7 million gotaways, if you put a backpack on 100,000 of them, fill it with 20 pounds of fentanyl, how much fentanyl just came through the border? You have no idea how many people are going around the ports of entry and delivering fentanyl into the U.S. I do, because I've arrested many people and in an intel aspect asked them how they got the fentanyl into the United States, and they've replied that they came around the ports of entry. The other stat is that mostly United States citizens are bringing fentanyl into the country. Again, that's because that's who we catch at the ports of entry. And of course, the cartels are going to pay United States citizens to bring it in through a port of entry, because their likelihood of getting past an immigration inspector is much higher than sending an illegal alien through the port of entry to try to do that. So okay. The statistic is off on that, and people constantly say it wrong.
No, I thank you so much for explaining it. But so based on your experience, how much is coming from non-Americans across the border, approximately, based on your experience?
Yeah, I believe the number is it's really hard to extrapolate, because we have on video, we have on drone video, we have on border video. So the border is fully cambered. I mean, we can see a lot of stuff, and we see traffickers coming through, and we've stopped loads in the interior of the U.S. that have gotten through, and that we have no idea, how they've gotten through and how those drugs have gotten into those cars. Those cars didn't drive across the border. The drugs were put in those cars at a different location, and then those cars went further into the interior. So it's very hard to extrapolate that, but I would say it's probably over 50%. I believe a large amount gets snuck through the ports in large conveyances, but like I said, if you took 20,000 people and to put a backpack on them and put 20 pounds of fentanyl in that backpack, you've got hundreds of thousands of pounds of fentanyl coming across the border. And we all know it only takes a small amount of fentanyl to kill a bunch of people. So it is happening a lot. And unfortunately, we're not catching it. And we're not really able to say, to definitive measure how much is actually coming around the ports of entry. Talking with John Fabbricatore. He's a candidate for CD6 in studio here. We're going to get to Chris in just a second. I'm Jeff and Bill.
John Fabbricatore. He's a candidate for CD6. Let's go to Chris. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'll be brief in light of your limited time. I contribute to Mr. F's campaign.
Thank you.
I think he's the greatest hope in terms of defeating Crow. Crow is my representative. I work in CD6, and his votes on the deportation and DUI illegal immigrants when he voted against that bill, and the last one that he voted against with Lincoln Riley have put me over the edge. But the two questions that I have for Mr. F are, what is your plan to deal with the hostile media that is the Front Range media? Because I understand your strategy on voting records, but I think all of us would agree that most people don't know or care what Mr.
We got about 20 seconds. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, look, I know it's going to be going into a lion's den when I get in front of the media here, and I'm ready for that. Like I am ready for them to attack me. I'm ready for them to say the things that they're going to say about me. And I'm just going to come head first into them. Look, you can call me all the names you want. I know what I've done. I know what my background is. And, I'm not going to play their game. And
he's a fighter.
Yeah, I'm a fighter. I'm going to come out and I'm going to tell you how I feel, what I think.
John
and let them attack me.
Fabbricatore for Congress.com. John Fabbricatore for Congress will be down at the State Assembly tomorrow. You've been listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
News Talk 710 KNUS.